The league was investigating a Colts player who had participated in pervasive wagering activity.
Pervasive.
Hundreds of wagers placed. It was first reported by Matt Ribeltowski of Sports Handle. The at the time unnamed player was under investigation for pervasive wagering activity. At the time, the Colts issued a statement regarding the allegation saying, quote, "We are aware of the NFL's investigation and we will have no further comment at this time." And Ribeltowski did say the allegations were isolated to one player. Later on in the evening, Stephen Holder and David Pardum of ESPN, I know Holder covers the Colts, their beat on ESPN.com, I believe, reported that it was Isaiah Rodgers, cornerback and kick returner. According to ESPN, approximately 100 bets were placed on an account over an undisclosed amount of time. Here's the big one. Including on Colts games. The bets were reportedly in the $25 to $50 range, but there was at least one, quote, low four-figure bet. So at least $1,000 on at least one game.
Yeah.
Rodgers is a former sixth-round pick of the Colts back in 2020. He signed a 4-year deal, and he's heading into year 4 of his career. He's in 15 games last year for the Colts.
And the big question in all of these always is like the degree of moral depravity goes up 1,000-fold if you find out he bet against the Colts. And that's always the question.
And I scoured these articles to find they say he bet on Colts games, but I can't find anywhere where it says if he bet on the Colts position.
I feel like that's the one thing that'll at least save you in the minds of the public and fans is that, okay, well, hey, I mean, let's be honest, a lot of us wish that it was mandatory that teams bet on their own teams to win or to cover at least, because, okay, yeah, that's even more motivation for them. Instead of having a completely guaranteed contract, they got some juice and some skin in the game here. Okay.
Yep.
It's if you found out that somebody was somehow trying to tank games or that's the really horrible part about it. And then the other thought that a lot of people had immediately was, okay, now let's see, is this perhaps the defensive back who let the ball slip through his hands and cost the Texans the number 1 overall pick by allowing the Texans to win that game? It was not. That was one Rodney Thomas. Yeah. Whereas this, it looks like the reports are that this is Isaiah Rodgers.
Yes.
Is that his name?
Yeah.
Yeah. There was a report that he's not a superstar, but he would be known to the average fan.
Yeah.
I object. Maybe the average Colts fan. I don't think the average NFL fan was like, "Oh, Isaiah Rodgers."
I never heard of him before.
They got that 6th-round pick from the Colts, did they?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I don't know. And you and I were talking about this during the break because a lot of times people will come up and say, "Hey, like why is it that the penalties are so severe for gambling, but but not necessarily as much for other things that are like morally worse, like actual violence at times or whatever transgression you want to look at?" I think a lot of it back to in the early days of professional sports in America, a lot of the team owners were also actual bookies. Like the Rooneys were actual bookies. The Giants owners were actual bookies. It was like, and so there needed to be some kind of extreme show of, hey, this is on the up and up. We're not involved in this. This is a fair and honest product and all that.
Yeah.
Because that, like, the integrity of the game, yes, it's true, but I like that is important. But I don't like, and you can't always weigh different moral transgressions on the same scale. But I think that is a certain part of it that the NFL also doesn't want to stand up and highlight. Be like, hey, right back when the Maras were big time bookies in New York.
Yes.
So we got to be sure that this is all, especially now that we're involved in the sports casinos, we got to be sure we're on the up and up.
Yeah, it's a good point. I don't know how many people know that part of the history of the sport, but it's the NFL. It's not steeped in gambling, but there are certainly roots that you can trace back. Now,
the history of the Rooneys as gamblers is an interesting one because they were basically painted out as like benevolent bookies.
Yeah.
The FBI described Rooney as a gambler with a controlling stake in illegal betting operations. Mm-hmm. But in the nearly 6 FBI documents in which Rooney is discussed, none of them allege that he or any of his frontmen ever used violence or the threat of violence to run the illegal ventures, as true mobsters did.
Yeah. Art Rooney would be the most boring Sopranos character of all time. He's the bookie with a heart of gold.
Relieving debts all over the place. Like, Art, did you come to break my knees. Like, no, I came to give you a hug and maybe shtup your wife. I don't know. Just I'm not going to beat you up. Just we'll figure something out, a payment plan
something
of some
less
sort.
violent that gets my rocks off. Yeah. For those wondering, Texan fan, and yes, there were a lot of Texan fans like, oh, when it was an unnamed player, they're like, oh, I wonder if it's this guy, Rodney Thomas, the guy who the ball slipped through his hands, as Seth pointed out. Isaiah Rodgers didn't even play in the game against the Texans in Week 18, because my next thought was, okay, was he the cornerback who gave up the 4th and 13 or whatever it was to Brandon Cooks on soft coverage earlier in that drive? You know, they converted 2 long 4th downs on that game-clinching drive.
Or who's the Colts player that forced the fumble on his own player?
I don't know who that was, but that showed up yesterday too.
Yeah.
If any team would bet against themselves,
away at his own guy.
That was crazy.
The hell?
That's
crazy. Stupid game. That game is so stupid. I saw an angle of that touchdown catch by Akins the other day that from field level that showed just how badly the ball had gone through Rodney Thomas's hands.
Yeah.
Oh my God, Rodney Thomas. You'll never get a drink in this town, and I'll never set up an illegal account for him to gamble through either. But this is going to be the problem with the NFL and gambling now. We've never like going back when the NFL were owners were bookies and all that stuff. There were never online apps that made it super super easy.
Yeah.
So whenever you try as a sports league, whenever you try to regulate something or ban something that's legal by the law of the land, it's really tough to do. I mean, they saw what was coming with marijuana and said, like, legalizing this in all these states, it's going to be a quagmire if we try to keep testing for this, because like anything you go out and grab easily, like if the NFL tried to ban alcohol, good luck with that. A vice that's legal by the law of the land, people going to vice, That's why it's a vice. You're going to vice. So now they've got gambling, and there's guys out there that have latent gambling problems and issues, and they're gonna gamble. Like I don't think there's almost any possible way to completely squash this, because it's an actual vice that guys have. Some guys are gonna have a natural tendency to be flat out addicted to it.
I'll be interested to see what the Colts do, Seth, because we've seen we've got a bit of a small sample, but we've got a handful of players now where we've gotten to see what teams do. And I guess maybe just as importantly, maybe not as important, but in a way kind of as important, is like, okay, how do fans view these guys who get caught gambling? Calvin Ridley got suspended for a season. He bet in games that involved the Falcons, but he bet on his own team. If Isaiah Rodgers bet against the Colts, he's done. He will never be welcome back in an NFL building ever again. If Isaiah Rodgers bet on the Colts, then it'll come down to how good a football player he is, because we've got the template now with Calvin Ridley. If you're a good enough football player and you get pinched for gambling on your own team, as long as it's low stakes stuff, then people are going to say how stupid you are for doing it, and it's dumb, and you didn't read the rules, and you shouldn't have done it. But look, I would take Calvin Ridley on the Texans right now. For a 5th round pick, he'd be the number 1 receiver on the Texans right now.
Right. Yeah, that's it. Doesn't, I don't think people look at it like, well, and also he had, he did the smart thing, which was he put
Players
a piece
Tribune
out
article
in Derek Jeter's website.
Yes.
And so
PR 101.
Hey, does Derek Jeter still own that website?
I don't know that he does. I'm not sure.
I wondered for years what the end game was in that, because they never had any advertising or anything. Mm-hmm. But I think they do now have advertising. So, yeah, sponsored by Intuit QuickBooks.
There you go.
I think they just built up a huge like search engine optimization and all that, and then sold it probably. And now they're banking.
4304 asks, why can't these guys get burner phones and use a different name? LOL. Isaiah Rodgers did use a different name.
Yeah.
Got caught. Yeah.
There's still humans involved on some level somewhere, or somebody new. This one, he set it up through a buddy, I guess. Was that that's what the current story is?
Yes.
He set it up through a person. So I guess the weak link there is that there's one person that is either going to blab or say something to somebody,
Yep. All right. Payne and Pendergast with you on a Tuesday. 713.
I wonder if now that he involved somebody else, does it involve? Is this a RICO law thing?
Ooh, was it across state lines? Yeah.
Does this constitute conspiracy or what have you?
Yeah, I don't know.
Badass. You can put it next to my FBI dossier.
And that's a thick